Just gonna jump into this one with a quote. The nature of capitalism is to turn nature into commodities and commodities into capital. The live green earth is transformed into dead gold bricks, with luxury items for the few and toxic slag heaps for the many. End quote. That's from Michael Pranthe, specifically from his book Democracy for the Few. Hi, how's it going? Before we get going, I want to go to some stats. A sort of autopsy of the end of the world, as I would deem it. Anyway, out of the 3.8 billion adults on this planet, just adults, they have amounted $470 trillion total. However, 60 million of those adults in the world have $226.47 trillion. That's equivalent to 48.1%. Compare this to 40% of the entire adults on this planet. 40%, 40.7%, sorry, 1.55 billion people have $2.7 trillion, or roughly equivalent to 0.6% of the entire wealth on this planet. Yeah, so I do that to depress you. I do that to bore you. I do that to, no, I do that to get to a definition of capitalism, because that's kind of what I've been thinking about. Just a sort of disclaimer, I don't have a script for this video. I have a lot of notes that you may hear, because my notebook is getting kind of unwieldy, to a point where I'm kind of embarrassed to even film it, because I not only take a lot of notes, but I save spots so that I can glue in future notes that I know I'm going to write down, because I read a lot of stuff and my memory is really bad. But before we get fully into it, I do want to read another quote that's staring me into the face at the moment on my page right here. Another one from Michael Pranthe, quote, "The power of a label is in its being left undefined, allowing it to have an abstracted, built-in, demonizing impact that precludes rational examination of its political content. The left, as I would define it, encompasses those individuals, organizations, and governments that advocate egalitarian, redistributive policies and human services benefiting the common people and infringing upon the privileged interests of the wealthy, propertied classes." End quote. And I took that specifically from Face of Imperialism. It's not one continuous quote, it's like around page 26. But yeah, that's Michael Pranthe, who you should read. And you can find his lectures here too on the YouTube. But I read that out because that's something that I feel a lot of stuff. Like I watched recently that Doom Scroll podcast, Joshua Citarella and Natalie Wynn ContraPoints, cursed be her name. I'm transgender, by the way. I should put that forward. I'm leftist. You know, as Michael Pranthe laid out, a label that undefined, built-in demonizing impact that precludes rational examination of its political content. When we say left and we talk about Kamala Harris, who at the same time, rightfully so, criticized Donald Trump of I don't know what she specifically said. Sorry, I don't have it written down, but helping the oligarchy. But I do remember, because I watched it live, her at the DNC at the same time ending that speech, talking about her promise to make America the biggest, most lethal military on the planet, as if it wasn't already. those figures that I read in the beginning, 60 million adults in the entire world owning 48%, 48.1%, and climbing probably more than that now with Trump's tax cuts and welfare cuts, and then the funds to ICE.
Why not just talk?
Talk to whom?
Talk to the Israeli leaders.
That's kind of conversation between the sword and the neck, you mean?
But that is what Parenti was also talking about in that same quote, the redistributive policies. That's what leftists sorry. That's what leftists are supposed to do, supposed to advocate towards. So when Kamala Harris talks about, or in the face of, oh crud, this is another actually really relevant fact. But before Kamala Harris came that other guy, who we can talk so much about, or yeah, okay, here we go. Okay, so I took this from Watson Brown University. They did this report in 2024 called "The Costs of War." Quote, from 2020 to 2024, private firms received 2.4 trillion US dollars in contracts from the Pentagon, approximately 54% of the department's discretionary spending of $4.4 trillion over that period, end quote. So that's pretty much like what I was just rambling on about right there. This idea of fighting the oligarchy in the way of being against, I don't know, I guess Palantir, I suppose, in the way of Trump. But at the same time, I mean, the CIA under Biden, or rather Obama, sorry, funded Palantir through In-Q-Tel. So I don't exactly know what Kamala Harris meant by by like criticizing Trump of fighting the oligarchy, especially when we consider, as I just read, in the beginning of this video, 1.55 billion people on this planet, adults on this planet, have $2.7 trillion. It's $2.7 trillion out of the 470 trillion available. And then at the same time, Biden gives roughly that same amount from public taxpayers of the government to private weapons manufacturers who, as I mentioned, with the funding of Palantir, that was, of course, private equity in the form of venture capital through In-Q-Tel. I can't really get into the entire rabbit hole that is In-Q-Tel, but Gabriel Rockhill, that's a good author, and some mind-blowing like interviews you can find here on YouTube. That should be on screen. I should be showing them on screen. Maybe I'll put like a specific like playlist or something together for this video. I don't know. Anyway, Gabriel Rockhill does a lot of really good work on uncovering the CIA sort of, I don't know, the CIA as a superstructural facet. Okay, so big jargon words right there, but I'm talking about Carlos Marx. I'm talking about Fred Engels. I'm talking about communism, socialism. So I start with that definition of capitalism. I go into the autopsy of our dying empire. Good riddance. But also, that concentration of wealth that definition of capitalism, the distribution of public wealth to private arms manufacturers, it's all one and the same. Whether we are criticizing Biden or we are criticizing Vanguard, BlackRock, and State Street for their, ownership of, I have that written down. Okay, here. BlackRock, Vanguard. Well, Vanguard now has overtaken BlackRock as a public asset manager. This is separate from the private equity I mentioned earlier with the InQtel, but another big private equity that you will be hearing a lot, especially if you are like me, interested in learning of the Palestinian resistance. Right now, funding the there's someone you should, or an organization you should check out, the Electronic Intifada. Like, I don't know, words escape me how valuable their work is. Go watch their live streams. They have covered every instance of the ongoing escalation into outright genocide. 2023 onwards. But anyway, when I talk about BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street, I'm talking about public asset managers who are sort of acting in the same way, at least from my understanding. In the same way that sort of Biden was acting in the way of what I just mentioned, the distribution, or rather the redistribution of public funds to private interest. The same people who own a majority in Chevron at 9%, Vanguard currently, followed by 8% State Street, and then followed by BlackRock Funding, which is separate from BlackRock, because both of them can own shares, the majority shares in a company such as Chevron, such as Target, such as Costco, such as Walmart, such as Google, Nvidia, United Health, practically every corporation, major corporation that is profitable, media organizations, Comcast, Warner Brothers, Fox Corporation, News Corp, Netflix, Disney, as well as what they came out of, BlackRock slithered its way out of Blackstone. But now it owns a majority share in Blackstone. And it's not that these public asset managers are sort of the, quote unquote, deep state, as it were. It is more so in that same vein of what I mentioned. That's why I mentioned Gabriel Rockhill. He really describes all of this very well. But another person you should check out when it comes to finance capital, Grace Blakely. She in particular, I've been learning so much from her book, Vulture Capitalism. But I believe because I listen to a lot of really boring nerdy stuff, but she in particular I feel like she's really good summing up the core sort of takeaways from her book in the lectures that she's done in interviews and whatnot here on YouTube. But anyway, yeah, go check her out. These vultures, these asset managers, they are, well, for one thing, there is indeed a sort of method of regulatory capture. I believe that's a term. I'm a dummy again. You should be I'm putting forward smarter people for you to stop watching this video, which is a bad idea. That's against the accumulation of capital on my end. But for real though, you should go check out who I am indeed putting forth. But I've taken a mind-boggling amount of notes, and I do feel like I'm coming to some sort of understanding. But anyway, these people are not working in the in the vein of like a deep state. However, the same way that they work superstructurally. So that's why I brought up Marx and Engels in the way that they laid out the superstructure, and why Gabriel Rockhill is such a good person to listen to, because he really describes this in a very good way. But superstructural, so legal and political in conjunction with the cultural. That's why I laid out why, Vanguard and BlackRock and State Street, or a subsidiary beneath them, another investor such as Berkshire Hathaway. They are a major investor, yet at the same time you look at Berkshire Hathaway, who owns a majority of them. It's Vanguard, followed by BlackRock, followed by BlackRock Funding, and then of course State Street. And it's not that these people are plain Pinocchio. It's that they are enforcing a sort of financial discipline, as they call it, where their main incentive within capitalism is, as we read at the beginning under Prenti, it's to commodify the planet, to maximize profit, to accumulate capital. And so when that happens, that's going to be at the expense of the worker. So in my last video, I mentioned how I was reading the book Blood in My Eye by George Jackson, which I finished. I did not finish Asada. I need to. But yeah, I feel like even after everything I've read, Mr. Jackson knew all of this, even back in the 70s, and spelled it out within a cell that was welded shut at times, like literally spelled it out. I'm looking for a quote now that is going to be really pertinent going forward. Okay, quote, "Consciousness is the opposite of indifference, of blindness, blankness. Promoting consciousness involves the general dissemination of the concept that each of us is part of a universal action and interaction, that poles are somewhere connected, that there are material causes for trauma, vertigo, degenerative disease, connections, cause and effect, clarity on their relation and interrelation, the connection with the past, continuity, flow, movement, the awareness that nothing remains the same for long." End quote. Again, that's by George Jackson from Blood in My Eye. And yeah, what he's describing there is dialectics. The idea that say for example, the BDS movement, on behalf of solidarity with the people of Palestine, is somehow, abstracted and separate from, say, people like me, like transgender activists who would seek more affordable means of healthcare. That is false. It can't actually be a thing, because in that sort of vein that George Jackson, I believe he's referring specifically to Immanuel Kant, and when he brings up George Jackson, that is the poles are somewhere connected. He's referring to magnetic poles, and that's how at least from my understanding, Kant best sort of